Hello and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. We are going to be celebrating our graduates this Sunday, and we've gotten them each a gift. And surprise, surprise, it's a book. Actually, it's a really good book. It's if you're going to be here and you're one of the graduates, don't listen to this part. If you're somebody else, listen closely. It's The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, which is a book that is both very funny and very pointed. And it goes together. It's a humorous exposition of the temptations and the difficulties that someone starting out their life, their Christian life, is going to face. And it does it in a way that, as I say, is funny. It gets things through. Humor is a great gift. And it's one of those things that comes from God. I'm absolutely sure of that. I think it was Martin Luther. And people tend to ascribe things to him when they don't know who else it might have been. But I think it was him who said that the one thing the devil can't handle is laughter and being mocked. And this book does that. But it does it, as I say, in a way that gets the point through for someone. A lot of times, God's gifts, plural, come to us wrapped inside something else. Just like the book is going to go to each of the graduates wrapped up in paper. And some of the biggest gifts come in some of the most elaborate wrappings. When I look at the book of Genesis, there is a gift that God offers a man named Abram and his wife Sarah. And it turns out to be a gift that's not just for them, but as they understand it, for their family. And as time went on, it began to be understood as a gift to all humanity. And like any other gift, it requires a little bit of unwrapping. The middle part and right up to the end of the book of Genesis talks about how God offers that gift and how it begins to be unwrapped in the lives of several generations of people, sometimes called the patriarchs. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel and Leah, her sister. And it goes on, Joseph and his brothers. And eventually, something even bigger happens out of all of that. This is one of the reasons why the Old Testament is important, and you can't just chop it out of the Bible and say, oh, the New Testament, I can be a New Testament Christian. Yeah, you can be, but not without the Old Testament to explain what the New Testament is about. They go together. But I'm jumping ahead. Let me first present what Genesis says, and then give you a little bit of an overview and why I'm going to be doing these sermons in the following weeks. So stick with me. Here we go. Let's begin at Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 9. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent there with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and invoked the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on by stages toward the Negeb. Genesis is very much a family epic. Beginning with the words we just heard, it talks about the ups and downs, and there were very big ups and downs, of an extended family, sometimes very extended, that moved around the Middle East, from Turkey to Mesopotamia, to the Mediterranean coast, back up to Syria, to Egypt, all over the place, over a period of generations during the Bronze Age. We can't put solid dates on any of it, but we're talking about a period somewhere between 2000 BC and 1300 BC, give or take. But the dates aren't as important as the events. Yeah, the dates they do matter, in a sense. Not the exact dates, but what was going on. There was a lot in that story that is typical of that age. Things that are very strange to us. Things that they take for granted, like slavery and polygamy, fortune-telling, idol worship. There are even echoes of child sacrifice. And we hear in these stories about desert chieftains and pharaohs, absolute monarchs. There are horses, but there are no camels, because camels had not yet been domesticated. So when you see artwork showing the patriarchs on camels, that's an anachronism. Many of the events in this whole story hinge on finding enough water and enough pasture for the sheep and the goats. These people start out in a city and they become nomads, which seems kind of backward. There was a lot going on there that probably we will not ever fully understand because it's thousands of years ago. But there is much that we understand intimately. There are marital problems. There are arguments within the family. Parents play favorites. Teenagers fall in love. People try to scam each other on business deals. Some of them become refugees from natural disasters. Others get caught they get caught up into the wars of their neighbors. Disagreements over inheritance turn very, very ugly. Babies are born. People find themselves cushy jobs. They worry about aging. And life goes on. And the life that goes on in these stories isn't just one person's. It goes from generation to generation to generation, and it unrolls in its way. Underlying it all is the guidance and protection of the Lord, who shows up in every story, quietly or prominently. But he's there all the way along. It begins with the moment that the Lord singles out a 75-year-old man named Abram, who's living in Haran, which is a town in Upper Mesopotamia, which is not a township in New Jersey, no. It's an area in what's now southeastern Turkey. And this man and his wife apparently were living quite comfortably. And then the Lord, whom he knew and seems on intimate terms with, tells him, Abram, I've got a job for you, and I want you to leave all of this. Just go from your own country and your kindred and your father's house and go to the land that I'm about to show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, the one who curses you, I'll curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Now, there's a lot going on there. That's a major promise. And there's a lot missing from the statement. The book of Genesis, the story, does not tell us some of the things that really would be dramatic if you were turning it into a novel or into a play. I mean, first off, was Abraham really used to hearing from God in that direct way? Or when he heard it, did he question his sanity? Did Sarai, his wife, have a word or two to say when he informed her that they were going to be leaving the city and going out where? He doesn't know, but out beyond the city walls with what? Oh, the entire household. Did she just say, okay? They had a nephew, Lot, who seems to have been part of their household. What role did he play in it? We hear later on about how things led to their separation, but at this point, how was he working with or for Sarah and Abram? And what led them to take him along? They had so much going for them right there in Haran. All the possessions that they gathered, all the persons whom they had acquired. And now what? The trip was at first a little bit easier. I mean, it took them through some of the decent land along the eastern Mediterranean. The area of Canaan, that would be the area of Palestine, that would be all the land from Lebanon down to Egypt. And there at least was pasture there. But then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring," and he didn't have offspring at this point, "I will give this land." And that sounds pretty good. But instead of staying there, they travel east. And then, after God promises them that whole stretch of land, they continue traveling. Not on the good land, but toward the Negev, toward the desert. What's going on? Everything that happened to them and to the family that they would unexpectedly continue and carry on. Some would say found. All of that had the same divine presence and the same divine promise in the background of their story from generation to generation to generation. And God continued speaking to some of them, but maybe not to all of them, across the centuries. At times, they're intimately aware of God. And at other times, you can see them just wondering whether he's been at work without their knowledge behind the scenes, or whether he's kind of let them go. On the whole, when you take not just the lives of Abram and Sarai, but also the lives of their descendants, and you put it all together into this epic tale, what we end up seeing as people are born and people die off, as people travel, as they go into slavery and they are freed from slavery, as there are droughts, as all of this goes on. The constant presence is God more than the people. And we end up seeing this part of the Bible, and eventually the whole Bible, as the story of God and God's involvement in people's lives. It's a story about him in which we all take part. Now back to the first part of this. Their world was one filled with petty kings. Petty kings who considered themselves mighty warriors. And their time overlapped with an age when the first large empires on earth were taking shape in the Middle East. Yet it was not into the stories about Sargon of Akkad or Nebuchadnezzar, who came much later, but is a familiar name. It's not in the stories of those great emperors that God and his story was unfolding. Instead, it was unrolling in the midst of this seemingly insignificant and often very messed up family that looked back to Abram and Sarai. And in the middle of that particularly chaotic part of the world, in that particularly chaotic part of human history, the God who had called those people to make some very strange choices would himself, through an inexplicable, miraculous birth, 1,000 and more years later, take on human form. And at that moment, almost 2,000 years after Abram, another descendant of his would say that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, so that we have seen his glory, the glory as the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. It would be from the events that were kicked off when those two 75-year-olds, or at least one 75-year-old and another that was pretty darn close to it, left town and went out on a camping expedition that would last not only for the rest of their lives, but for the lives of their descendants. Everything that would go back to that within their family would eventually lead to Jesus. The blessing that God gave them, the way for all people of all the earth to be blessed, to be redeemed, to be one family, to be fully God's family, his own children. All of that was getting a running start. And that is an important part of letting us know, the way God let us know, who God really is. Not the one whose image is that of the king of Haran, whose name we don't even know, but that of one whose full being came to us in a baby who would be a carpenter and who would gather around him a family of normal people and show them the way to travel through the world. Come back next week, and we'll hear some stories about how God pointed us all off in that direction.